On June 16, 1918, the prominent socialist labor leader Eugene Debs delivered a speech in Canton, Ohio. And in that speech, Debs argued against U.S. involvement in World War I, and he praised activists who had been organizing against the military draft or had been convicted of sedition. At the time, Debs was one of the most prominent socialists in the United States, and his speech came on the heels of the Russian Revolution and the rise of global socialist and communist movements.
The working class who fight all the battles, the working class who make the supreme sacrifices, the working class who freely shed their blood and furnish their corpses, have never yet had a voice in either declaring war or making peace.
Soon after Debs delivered that speech, he was arrested and charged under a new law in the US that had passed just a year earlier. It was called the Espionage Act. Debs and his lawyers argued that his anti-war speech was protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution. They lost, and Debs was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The case eventually went to the US Supreme Court, where the justices voted unanimously to uphold his conviction. "I believe in free speech in war as well as in peace," Debs told the jury during his trial. "If the espionage law stands, then the Constitution of the United States is dead." Congress eventually amended parts of that act, but the thrust of the law has remained in effect to this day. Anarchist Emma Goldman was also prosecuted under the act. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed after being convicted under the law. Throughout its history, the Espionage Act has been used as a weapon to attack free speech and dissent. And then came the Pentagon Papers case, where the government charged the whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg under the Espionage Act. He faced more than 100 years in prison.
How can you measure the jeopardy that I'm in? Whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 115 years, or other ludicrous amounts like that, to the penalty that has been paid already by 50,000 American families here, and hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese families.
The charges were ultimately dismissed in 1973, mostly because of rampant misconduct and illegal surveillance by the Nixon administration. But it was this model, developed by Nixon's Justice Department, that would be passionately adopted decades later as the weapon of choice of President Barack Obama to wage attacks on journalistic sources and journalism.
Since I've been in office, my attitude has been zero tolerance for these kinds of leaks and speculation.
Obama's Justice Department indicted 8 journalistic sources under the Espionage Act, more than all U.S. presidents before him combined. Among these cases was U.S. Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning, former CIA officer Jeffrey Sterling, National Security Agency whistleblower Thomas Drake, and NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden. In some of these cases, people were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. In others, the government ruined the lives of the targets.
We're going to find the leakers. We're going to find the leakers. They're going to pay a big price for leaking.
And then Donald Trump takes power and immediately begins using the playbook refined and sharpened by his predecessor, President Obama. Donald Trump is now surpassing Obama's 8-year record in just over 2 years in office. The first case Trump brought was against Reality Winner, who was accused of leaking a top-secret document to a news organization. That NSA document related to alleged Russian intelligence operations aimed at breaching software systems used in some U.S. voting systems. And then FBI agent Terry Albury was indicted for allegedly leaking information about FBI surveillance and informant operations to a news organization. The government did not name the media outlet in these cases, but other news organizations attributed the reporting to The Intercept. And then in early May came the arrest of another alleged whistleblower, Daniel Everett Hale. The Justice Department is accusing Hale of leaking documents on the global assassination program and drone programs run by the Obama administration.
The most disturbing thing about my involvement in drones is the uncertainty if anybody that I was involved in kill or capture was a civilian or not. There's no way of knowing.
This indictment also does not name a news organization, but Trump administration officials in leaks to news organizations have claimed that it's The Intercept. Now, I want to be clear here. Nothing I say here should be understood as discussing the specifics of the Hale case The Intercept does not discuss confidential sources or alleged sources, whoever they are. But I want to state the following. Whoever provided documents for the Intercept's reporting on U.S. assassination operations should be viewed as a hero who did a major public service at immense personal risk. This whistleblower provided the most detailed account ever published of what amounts to a secret legal system wherein the President of the United States and his advisors make lists of people to kill, including U.S. citizens who have not been charged with crimes. These documents we published showed that at times as many as 9 out of 10 people that the U.S. kills in its so-called targeted assassinations are not the intended target. They revealed how the watch listing system has spiraled out of control and how U.S. citizens have no right to know if or why they are on watch lists or kill lists. This was an extremely important and brave moment in the history of the post-9/11 secrecy and mass killing operations and the fight against them. Back in 2015, I discussed this on Democracy Now!
This government has been relentless in its pursuit of people of conscience who blow the whistle and has characterized them as traitors and spies, and in the process has criminalized the ability to do independent journalism that is meant to hold them accountable, the government accountable.
We are at an extremely dangerous moment in the history of this country. Donald Trump is using the same rhetoric used by Nazi officials in the 1930s and 40s to attack the press. He said he wants to jail journalists who publish stories he doesn't like. And he's wielding the Espionage Act like a chainsaw against journalistic sources. What makes it all so much worse is that it was the constitutional law scholar and Trump predecessor, Barack Obama, who teed Trump up, who laid the groundwork, who blazed the trail for this extremely deranged and dangerous man currently occupying 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But look at the way these stories are covered in the broader media. With a few notable exceptions, the lack of solidarity or just basic understanding of how dangerous these cases are is just largely absent. Instead, there are attacks on the news organizations or the reporters. For all of the talk of how dangerous Trump is to a free press, why hasn't the Reality Winner case been covered more extensively? Why is a CNN reporter losing credentials a national scandal, and threatening alleged whistleblowers with 50 years in prison is a non-story? My colleague James Risen knows a lot about the Espionage Act. He fought the Bush and Obama administrations for some 7 odd years when they tried to force him to testify against an alleged source being prosecuted under the act. Recently, Jim was on Democracy Now! Discussing how many media organizations cover these cases.
I think that's a fundamental flaw in the way the press covers these things, is that they look at it as a crime rather than as an attack by the Justice Department on the press in the United States, which is what this is.
Daniel Everett Hale is facing a half a century in prison for his alleged crime of blowing the whistle on a secret assassination program that regularly resulted in the killing of civilians, including an American teenager. None of this is about espionage. And it should be clear to every journalist in this country, to every person of conscience, that what this prosecution is about is threatening anyone who even thinks of leaking, say, a Trump tax return. This is about criminalizing journalism. It's about increasing the secrecy and decreasing the transparency. It's an assault on the very idea of a democratic society. At these moments, silence is complicity. Everyone should care about what happened to Reality Winner, and what's happening again to Chelsea Manning, and what's happened to Edward Snowden, and yes, what's happening to Julian Assange. And we should all care what happens to Daniel Hale. This is a precedent-setting moment, not just legally, but morally, because this is not the end. This is the beginning, and they will eventually come for other news organizations, or they will scare media outlets from doing high-stakes national security reporting. It doesn't matter what you think of any of these individual whistleblowers. It doesn't matter what you think of The Intercept, but it does matter that we all recognize that this is an attack on our basic rights to information about what the US government does in our names and with our tax dollars. It matters that people who blow the whistle on crimes and war crimes be defended and not abandoned or portrayed as violent criminals or traitors. All of us must ask ourselves where we stand. History will remember our answers.